especially Jane Lubell, for getting this room for us today. Otherwise, we would have had to have 5 classes over and over at the library. So, thanks, Jane.
I thank you.
John Salzer has been preparing for this class for a couple of months, maybe even years. It quickly became evident that the amount of information and photos that he has amassed would need much more than the 1.5 hours that we're allowing him today. We might have a little more than 1.5 hours.
You're taking up my time, right?
Yeah, sorry. I'll talk faster. Today's presentation is an overview of Sunriver's history, and subsequent classes will be offered that go into more depth, and with topics being broken down into 17-year periods. The Salzers moved here full-time in 1999. During these 21 years, John has served on the SROA board, the Service District Board, the Amenities Task Force, and numerous committees. The first time I was introduced to John by Barbara Brocker, she said, "I think of him as Mr. Shark." Well, after tonight's talk, I think we'll all think of him as Mr. Sunriver. So, needless to say, John is well qualified to give us a complete overview of the place we call home.
Thank you, Kim. That was good. So that took 5 of my minutes. So this is going to be a journey, and it's a wonderful journey, and I want to thank you for coming along with me. But before I start, I've got to get in character. So I am going to put on a sweater. The sweater has the Sunriver emblem. And this sweater was what the employees wore in 1969 when they started. I do. When they started having people come to visit. And I was able to get...
It's too small for you, John.
Oh, it is. Anyway. So before I begin, has anybody lived here longer or moved in here before 1971? Aha, when did you? 68. Oh, one of the originals. Somebody in the back there said, what was that? No. I wasn't aware of that. Is that you, Joe?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I see you now. We invited Thelma Moxley in the front row here, 99 years old. And she bought a lot in 1971 and moved in 1973. So I thought that either Joe over there or Thelma would be more qualified than I am to teach class because they lived it. But I'm going to do my best. Linda and I lived in Portland. And in 1969, Portland Oregonian had an ad, this ad right here, in the newspaper. And you'd fill it out and you could get a free weekend. And those of you who know me know I'm cheap. I said, great, let's do it. We did. Linda couldn't come, so I decided I'd come. So, after all, what could I lose? I still remember driving through Bend, and I got stuck for 30 minutes because of a freight train on 3rd Avenue, and you couldn't get around it. Then I headed south on 97. They called it a highway, but it was a 2-lane road over Lava Butte, and out in the middle of nowhere, and all of a sudden there was a sign saying Sunriver exit. So I turned on the exit, and I said to myself, what am I getting myself into just for a free weekend? So I got here, stayed in one of the lodge condos. They had 8 units, and all I had to do was go to 2 things. One was a bus tour of Sunriver, and the other was a sales presentation. So I went through those, and during the sales presentation, we were informed that every lot we saw on the tour was $7,000. But if we bought it that weekend, we could get it for $6,000. So as I was leaving on Sunday afternoon, heading home, I said to myself, these founders really have a great concept. I'm really impressed, but it'll never fly. There's no way this thing is going to work. So Linda and I, 30 years later, realized it did work, and they had been able to do it. So we ended up moving here in 1999, and have been ever since. So when I was asked to put on this class, I jumped at the opportunity because I wanted to find out how did they do it. Because 30 years before that, I said we'll never do it. So this is what today's program is about. I have 800 pictures. I'm not going to show 800 today. I can't. But it is going to be a lot of pictures because pictures say 1,000 words. So let's start at the beginning. 7,000 years ago, Lava Butte erupted, and that's the cone that was left. And it created a lake 15 miles long, and Sunriver is in the orange. And 3,000 or 6,000 years ago, it started getting global warming, not man-made global warming, but global warming in any way. And it dried up the lake, and it created the History River. So the Native Americans, we have evidence that they were here 10,000 years ago, 3,000 years before the eruption. This thing is not hidden. So they lived in the Great Meadows and in the caves around Sunriver. The first white man who came to Sunriver was Peter Ogden Stiles in Ogden in 1825. He was a member of the Hudson Bay Company, and they hired him to come and look for fur. In 1843, John Charles Fremont traveled through here on the way to California. How many people are familiar with him? All right. How many of you know that he ran for president as the first Republican candidate in 1856? Okay, of those who raised their hand, Mal and Jay, who did he lose to? Jay, come on up. Two of the guys that he had, Fremont had, was Kit Carson, who we all are familiar with, and a young Native American by the name of Billy Chinook. He was a 19-year-old, and he went back with Fremont to the East Coast, Washington, D.C., and he was educated, and then afterwards he came back and he became the chief of the Warm Springs Native tribe. Shortly thereafter, a name we're familiar with is Henry Larkham Abbott came through, and he was on an expedition by the Pacific Railroad, and he had 49 people with him. He had botanists and geologists and all these people with him checking out the area, and then he kept a big, real strict diary, and on September 2nd of that year, he stayed in the Great Meadow. The next event that really impacted Sunriver was logging. I think all of us know that. Two companies, Shevlin Hickson and Brooks Scanlon, were Minnesota companies who had logged every tree in Minnesota. So between 1890 and 1910, they bought 300,000 acres of land from the U.S. Forest Service and moving out here. And Sunriver was a huge ponderosa forest, as Lee mentioned before, and trees that were 8 feet in diameter were prevalent, like this one that they're cutting down here, and they were easy pickings. So they would cut the trees, take them down, haul them down to the river, and cut them up, put them down the river, and float them to Bend. In Bend, the Shevlin Hickson mill was on the left, and the Brooks Scanlon mill was on the right. By 1925, the two mills were the two largest producing mills in the country. They were producing 300,000 feet of timber. They had 2,000 workers. This thing is moving. Anyhow, 300,000 board feet of timber. That was 18 That was 18,000 square feet, or 1,800 square feet of trees. We're at 1,800 square feet of houses. But by December 1950, they had run out of trees. They hadn't planted one tree. Shevlin Hickson sold out to Brooks Scanlon, and they went out of the lumber business. All that remains is the 3 stacks that we're all familiar with downtown. Does anybody else besides me find it ironic that Brooks Scanlon went out of the lumber business but went in the development business? And at the same time that Sunriver was being formed, they decided to develop Black Butte. Black Butte was an unforested ponderosa forest. So don't you find it ironic that they chose an area that they hadn't cut all the trees down to make a resort? I find that ironic. And what did these 2 companies do to Sunriver? This is a picture 20 years after they stopped their cutting. The resort is on the bottom right-hand corner. This is a picture of the airport. They built the airport without having to cut down one tree because there weren't any trees. The next event that I want to talk about is Camp Abbott. During the first few years of the war, everybody was trained in the Army Corps of Engineers at either Fort Belvoir, Virginia, or Fort Leavenworth in Missouri. The Army realized they had to gear up and speed up their training program, discovered that Central Oregon was just like France, where they were going to train these soldiers and they were going to fight in France. So they picked the Sunriver area. Time won't permit me to go into a lot of detail today, but let me show you some pictures and focus on the Great Hall, which you're all familiar with. In October 1942, approval was given to build Camp Abbott. The camp was designed to be a self-contained city, complete with 50 barracks, mess halls, recreation facilities, laundry facilities, electricity, water, and sewer system, road, and whatever else was necessary to house 10,000 people. They were given a target to have it ready in 6 months, and they made it. So, in May 1st of 1943, 900 new trainees showed up, and shortly thereafter it expanded to 10,000, so they had 10,000 people being trained. This is pictures of the barracks. This is a picture of, in orange, can't really tell, is Camp Abbott, and then you can see where Sunriver is in the black. So it was right over Sunriver. Just to give you a perspective, when you came into Sunriver, you went under that sign that said Camp Abbott, and the hospital was where the business park is now, all the way over to East Park Lane, 411 patient hospital. This is a picture showing the range and the motor where they did the anti-tank training and so forth. Highway 97 is over to the right, and you can see where the Deschutes River is. This right here is from the airport to River Road, where they had rifle and machine gun training. The biggest contribution to Sunriver that Camp Abbott gave to us, what is now known as the Great Hall. It was by far the largest single structure at Camp Abbott, a building 50 feet wide and 96 feet long. It was going to be the officers' club. Building it wasn't easy. For 3 months, soldiers spent every hour around the clock in sub-zero weather building it. As you can see, a total of 63,000 man-hours were spent building it. The only out-of-pocket cost to build the structure was $4,796. That's all, $4,700. Everything else was obtained on site. Now, so what they had to pay for were window panes, cement, and plumbing fixtures. Everything else they were able to gather. Here is the rafters are being installed 10 tons of volcanic rock was used to construct the 2 fireplaces. All was collected and shaped from the Deschutes and Willamette Forest. Here are workers installing the spiral staircase by hand. The roof is finished on December 24th, just in time for the annual Christmas party for the officers and their family. And then ironic that they were able to get it done so the officers and their family could have a Christmas party. Unfortunately, this was the only event ever held in the Great Hall. The Officers Club was officially dedicated 4 months later. Camp Abbott was operational for only 14 months, and the war ended. But it trained 90,000 soldiers. Does anyone know why Camp Abbott survived? Not Camp Abbott, the Great Hall survived the end of the war. Now?
Well, it was owned by the officers, it wasn't owned by the government.
It's almost right.
They had no right to tear it down.
It was, partly correct, it was never approved. So the Army hadn't approved it. So when they were getting ready to dismantle Camp Abbott, they had a list of buildings to take down in Camp Abbott, and the Great Hall wasn't on that list. So it didn't get touched. Also, little known fact is the post chapel, pictured here, was dismantled piece by piece, transported to Prineville, put together, and this is the Lutheran Church, Our Savior Lutheran Church on 3rd Avenue in Prineville. Also surviving, you may know, if you go to the Public Works office, Mark Smith has a storage area, which was a round building that somehow survived. I'm not sure how. Next, let's go fast on this. So next, Camp Abbott, after it closed, changed hands numerous times. In 1945, it was purchased by the Hudspeth Cattle Company out of Prineville. They owned 350,000 acres of cattle property. But in 1964, they lost the loan. They defaulted on a loan, including Camp Abbott. So they went to their son-in-law, a guy named Lee Smith, and said, "You've got to get rid of this property so we can pay off our debts." Lee was married to the daughter of the husband. He decided instead that they would buy the property and build a resort on it. So he could have been the most important person in our lives if we were living here in Sunriver. What happened was he hired a guy named Guillermo Lehman and had Guillermo come up and design a plan for what is now Sunriver. And it's interesting that I was able to come across the plot plan. This has never been seen in Sunriver, by the way. The plot plan of what he called Evans Park. I have pictures of it. A little bit, you can tell a little bit there. That's what it looks like. It's pretty much like Sunriver. The only difference is the part in blue, the part in black is the Deschutes River. The part in blue are canals. So he was going to dig canals throughout Sunriver so you could live in Sunriver and be able to take your boat and go out onto the Deschutes. So what happened? Well, he needed financing. So he went to Don McCallum, who was the owner of a real estate company in Portland, and wanted him to invest in this thing. McCallum had hunted and fished throughout the area, and he loved it. And he was appalled by this plan. So he said, okay, to himself, I'm not quoting him, but I think he said to himself, we can't have this happen. So he got John Gray involved. And John Gray, for those of you who don't know, had just built saddle shed over on the Oregon coast. And he was the owner of Omark Industries. So he got John Gray, and the two of them met with Evans. And the three of them met, and they convinced him to go into business together, the three of them. So they did. They were going to be equal partners, 1/3 each. So, the question I have is, do you think they thought about after they purchased this? So they're having lunch. John Gray and McCallum are having lunch and saying, what in the hell have we gotten ourselves into? The challenges of doing this were immense. Here are some of the challenges I perceived. Sunriver was out in the middle of nowhere, 15 miles from Bend, which was a city of 12,000 people. A cargo train went through Bend 3 or 4 times a day and stopped for 30 minutes. A 2-lane highway over Lava Butte with no divider. The closest viable airports were Eugene and Portland. Took 2 to 4 hours to drive from Portland, Eugene, and Salem in good weather. But there were some good things about it, and they had to realize what they were. They had a blank slate to work with. They had 5,500 acres, which were surrounded on 3 sides by the National Forest. They had the beautiful Deschutes River running through it and around it. Great hunting, fishing, skiing, hiking. One could truly get away if they wanted to. 270 days of sunshine, low humidity. On average, only 11 days of temperatures over 90. Fairly easy distance to Mount Bachelor and 11 lakes. So what did they do? Well, first they formed, as I mentioned, Sunriver Properties as Gray being the chairman and McCallum being the president. So where does that leave Lee Evans? He was never heard from again. So they got their wish. He left and sold his interest in 1968. They then hired Robert Royston, who had worked for John Gray over in Salishan. He's a landscape designer. And he came out here and spent 2 years developing the Sunriver plan. And Lee mentioned the fact that we're going to celebrate Earth Day. When they finished the plan of Sunriver, Earth Day wasn't a term that anybody knew. So it was 2 years before Earth Day. I say that because the plan they came up with was so unique and so outlandish that the Bend Bulletin had an editorial saying, we'll give them 2 years. It is interesting to note that the plan of Sunriver has adhered to the plan of Sunriver, and we still have it. It's called the Consolidated Plan of Sunriver. And you can go on the website and look at it. And basically, it's the plan that they completed in 1966. First and foremost, what was in the plan? First and foremost, the plan was the preservation of the Great Meadow and the river frontage so that all future residents and visitors could enjoy them. Thus, no development would be allowed on these 2 areas. Now, you're a developer. Those 2 areas are the prime real estate people. That's places. That's where you're going to make all your money. And they said, no, we're going to leave it for people to enjoy. So what else was in the plan? The plan put restrictions on curbs. There weren't going to be any curbs. The plan called for circles on main roads to slow down traffic. People said, why? So you could look at the beauty of the natural area. The plan created bike paths that were going to be used for both recreation and access to the common areas. The plan said house colors had to blend in rather than stand out. Now there's a side story here. There's a videotape that I have, but I didn't have time to show, and it was Bob Royston, the architect, and John Gray taking a hike up on Lava Butte. And they looked down onto the property, and John Gray said, what is that white thing? And Royston says, oh, John, that's your house. He had painted the house white. So that wasn't in the original plan, but the next day the house got painted, and the plan got changed. The plan called for creating massive common areas of trees and vegetation to retain the natural atmosphere and provide further separation of homes. The plan banned outside lighting except for those facing down to keep the night light unblemished. The plan said all utilities were to be buried. Nobody did that back then. It was too expensive. But they said in the plan, yes, they will be, and they were. They even had the establishment of an environmental committee, too, whose primary responsibility was to assure that these guidelines were adhered to moving forward. This is a thing I didn't realize until I got into it. Did you ever consider the fact that a person driving into Sunriver can drive to their residence without ever having to experience a stop sign? Think about that. The next brilliant thing that John Gray did was to bring Jim Anderson, a naturalist, onto the team as one of the organization's first employees. While it is generally believed that Gray and McCallum were the two behind the vision of Sunriver and making it work, it was really Royston and Jim Anderson that were the driving force. According to Anderson, Gray told him on their first visit that we are going to be visitors here, and your job is to make sure future generations will enjoy the beauty as much as we do. Jim was given great authority. For example, every tree that was scheduled to be cut down to put a road in had to be approved by him. If it didn't get approved, either the road had to be moved to avoid cutting it down, or in this case, where on West Cascade, they went around the tree that Jim wanted to save. Jim resigned in 1974 over a disagreement regarding the restoration of the river. If you ever have a chance to meet him, he lives in Bend. If you ever have a chance to meet him, he is a character and he has 100 stories. Take advantage of it. One concept that didn't get approved that was in the original plan was the idea of putting parking lots at the entrance of Sunriver. And you would drive into Sunriver, park your vehicle, and get into a golf cart or one of these kind of vehicles and go to your house, and you would never drive again until you got ready to go. Unfortunately, the bike craze took off, and this never got past fruition. Some people think that the plans we have and the guidelines we have are inviolate, they can't be changed. One of the initial plans was that all roofs had to be wood-shaped roofs. Well, of course, that got changed because of fire danger. We also are allowed to have lawns and driveways, which weren't in the original plan. So the plan has been flexible over the years, in spite of what some people think. Back to history. When I first visited Sunriver in the summer of '69, much had been accomplished in just 2 short years. Here's what I saw. The 38,000 square foot lodge, which was completed at a cost of $2.2 million. A lot of money back then. The first 9 holes of the South Course, which is now Meadows, was open. The South Pool had been built and operational. The former Camp Abbott Officer Club had been refurbished and converted into the Sunriver Center. Here's what was included in there. Well, this is where they had a small restaurant, sales office, and the thing I recall is they had these posters and miniature displays showing what Sunriver was going to look like when it was completed. Other things that had been finished when I visited were an airport. The airport was built for $197,000. Interestingly enough, to me, when I first saw it, I said, this doesn't fit the environment. This isn't natural. Initially, it was built for the benefit of McCallum and Gray, who liked to fly and had their own planes. So that's why they built it. Afterwards, it was a sales tool in getting people to fly in and live here. Speaking of the Sunriver Airport, just a piece of information you didn't know about. Air Oregon in the mid-'70s had flights that came in and out of Sunriver from Portland. 3 flights a day going each way. Progress. What else has been completed? Here was the marina that they had just finished. Finally, I stayed in one of these lodge cabins, condos that had been built. A little known fact is that the following year, in 1970, there was the first and only major fire we've had in Sunriver. 2 of these condo units, 8 units in total, burned to the ground. The 8 condos were valued at $350,000, or about $44,000 each. Amazingly, the fire was put out by Sunriver employees who were also volunteers. How did they do it? With the community's first and newly acquired fire truck. Here it is. They got it from, it was a 1945 American LaFrance pumper, and they found it in San Francisco and brought it up. The first lot sold in Sunriver in June of 1968. By the time this appeared, they had a sign up that they would change every couple of years. This one was in 1970. 71 condos had been built, and a total of 234 houses were being built. The first store in the mall was a service station, opened in 1971. It had a 7-Eleven type grocery store. I believe also this is the building that housed the dough factory, which is the first donut a bakery in the community. I also believe the Treehouse Pizza was there, which is currently the upstairs of Marcello's. Then in 72, Sunriver Properties began building the Sunriver Mall. The first building they built was the Sunriver Country Store, owned by Joe Audio, and it opened in 1973. Over the years, the store has stayed in the Audio family and is currently being run by Joe's son, John. He's remodeled it several times. The latest one was in 2011. The history of the mall is a class unto itself. The resort sold it to a guy named Joe Weston in 1973. Let me just say that between 2002 and 2008, those of us who were there here will know this, the mall had 4 different owners. It was in terrible shape. Interestingly, the owners of 2 of the businesses that were here, their principal owners are currently in jail. Both convicted of Ponzi schemes. So I'd love to have a class on the history of the mall. Let me just remind you that the current owners are not in jail. They are wonderful people and have been great members of the Sunriver community. About the same time, early 70s, many of you don't know this, many of you do, the folks in Sunriver found another use for the airport. Let's play polo. Sunriver formed a polo club and competed in the Pacific Northwest Circuit of the U.S. Polo Association. Games were played on the grass fields next to the airport. The matches were the highlight of the summer season, with people getting dressed up, bringing in picnic baskets and so forth. These are some of the teams. They're all over the West Coast and Canada. Sunriver annually hosted a weekend round-robin tournament against these teams from Washington or California, Wyoming, and even as far as Victoria and Calgary, Canada. The gentleman on our left, his name is Patricio Honey of Mexico City, commuted to Sunriver to play for our team. He even donated a Mexican cup, polo cup that he had won, that we used in the Sunriver International Tournament. At the same time, the Nature Center and Observatory was formed, but it was called the Ecologium. And it was located in the same building as the newly opened in 73 laundry, so they shared quarters. This is where the Southwind Bistro is currently located. Jay Bowerman, who many of us know, took over for Jim Anderson as resident naturalist in May of 1974. He and his wife, Teresa, have been leaders in the Sunriver community since they arrived. On a side note, during my investigation, Joe Lymph, over there, raise your hand, yeah. He was one of the managers in Sunriver, and he gave me a copy of this letter right here, which was the original letter that Joe wrote and Teresa typed on her Selectric typewriter, asking for a part-time job in the summer of 1970. And Joe hired him, and kind of the rest is history. Jay doesn't know I have this letter, so I'm going to make him pay for it. The Nature Center outgrew the laundromat building and moved to where the resort's HR building is on Circle 1. In 1982, the resort donated the 8 acres where the Nature Center is located near Lake Aspen. They wanted the permanent location. And they also pledged $20,000 for the first 2 years of operation. In 1990, the observatory was constructed, and a year later, the dome was added. Last year, over 45,000 visitors came to the Nature Center. So right now, they're undergoing a successful $5 million campaign to upgrade and improve the Nature Center facilities, if you're interested. By 1973, things were rosy and growing very fast. 600 private homes and condos had been built. Both the Sunriver Women's Club and the Sunriver Anglers were formed in 1972, and the potluck began in the 1970s. They're still in existence in Golinstown. John Gray estimated at the time that it would take 15 years before we actually had 15,000 permanent residents. Then the recession hit. How many of you are old enough to remember the 1973 recession? Not only that, we had an oil embargo. So, interest rates were 20%. So if you wanted to buy a house, you had to pay 20% interest. Imagine that today. Nobody would come to visit Sunriver because they couldn't afford to take the chance and not run out of gas. So they couldn't get anybody to come. So John Gray and the team were strapped for cash. So they said the only thing we can do is find a financially viable partner. So they did. They sold half of their interest to Connecticut Mutual Life Insurance. Connecticut Mutual brought in a guy who you may recognize by the name of Romney, George Romney. George ran for president in 1968. Okay, Mel, who beat him out?
What, presidency or?
For the Republican candidate. Nixon, yeah, okay. I just want to make sure you knew. George assured everybody that nothing was going to change, that he was going to adhere to the vision of Sunriver and the plan of Sunriver. But he didn't have time to really manage it. So he brought in his son, Scott. He was 33 years old. They had another son named Mitt. Some of you may recognize that name, a senator from Utah who just voted for impeachment of the president. Scott didn't stay long, 3 months, but long enough to fire most of the senior and loyal employees that we had. He also decided to pave the airport so that we couldn't have polo anymore. So I don't know much about him, but what I know I don't like. 2 years later, Connecticut Mutual decided they were going to get out of the property development business. So they went to the Forest Service and said, we want to sell back to you 3,300 acres of our 5,500 acres, 59%. And so here in orange is the property, 5,500 acres. The green is what would have been sold back to the Forest Service. Much of the land between Circle 5 and 11 would have disappeared, plus all of the land owned by Sunriver on the west side of the Deschutes River. The land in blue would have been the new Sunriver if the deal went through. Interestingly enough, they took a survey of the owners, and 80% of them said, let's do it. Most of them said they wanted to do it because they wanted to keep Sunriver small. The ones who opposed it wanted to have a second golf course. If they sold the property, they were afraid we wouldn't get the second golf course. You can imagine that the issue was very contentious. The county commissioners had to approve this deal. So they looked at it and said, golly, if we allow this to go through, what are we going to do for property taxes? We lose all those homes. So they said, no, we're not going to do it. So they turned it down unanimously. No one was happy with the deal. So quickly, a second plan was designed where we would sell back 2,200 acres instead of the 3,300. So the new one would be the area in blue. And that was quickly approved. And that's what we have today. But what we lost, and it was sad, was Circle 8. Circle 8 is up there in the green somewhere, never to be found. They announced the sale was going to be $6 million, and everybody, the Connecticut News was overjoyed. But they had to have it appraised. The appraisal came in at $2.8 million. So instead of getting 6, they got 2.8. But they were still happy, and that was fine. The North Course was originally going to be called the Mountain Village Course. Then someone realized that there wasn't a mountain on the course. And there wasn't going to be a village. So why are we calling it the Mountain Village Course? So the name that came up was changed to the Woodlands Course. And of course, those of you who played it know how many trees there are because you hit into it. So it was developed by a guy named Robert Trent Jones and Jr. And most people who are golf enthusiasts know who he is. He's one of the premier architects in the country. And he personally spent his time here developing it. So he had a hands-on part in developing it. A little trivia, just this side note, is we have a lot of entertainment here. We've had people at the Shark for the last few years, and we have the music festival and so forth. We started back in the 70s. The first was Glenn Yarborough. So some of us old folks remember him. He played in the Great Hall in 1972. He's famous for, among his others, was Baby the Rain Must Fall. Then the Christie Minstrels came. They were a top singing group in the 70s, famous for Green Green, This Land Is Your Land, Chim Chim Tree. And they came in 73. We became the place to go film Western movies. The first was The Way West, starring Kirk Douglas, Robert Mitchum, and Richard Widmark. And a little-known actress by the name of Sally Fields. She got no credits. In exchange for not paying to use Sunriver for 6 weeks during filming, the construction crew replaced the Great Hall roof. Then in '75, John Wayne and Katharine Hepburn actually lived in Sunriver part of the summer. Katharine rented a meadow house, and John Wayne stayed in John Gray's house, which then was sold to Kate Mendenhall, who some of you know, she still lives there. They were part of the social circle. They went to dinner at people's houses, and people went to their houses. They really became part of the community. And a lot of the Sunriver residents became extras in the film. John Wayne also starred in True Grit, which was filmed in part here in Sunriver. Also in the film were 3 fairly unknowns. Singer Glenn Campbell, we know from singing, but it was his first and probably last role. It was terrible. But also, Robert Duvall and Dennis Hopper had minor roles, and they would go on to be somewhat famous. But that's not it. That's not all. In 1982, the limo used by J.R. Ewing's family in the television show Dallas ended up here and was used to commute people from Sunriver up to Redmond. They had a Cadillac Eldorado, and what they did is they got another one and they cut it in half, added 30 inches to it, and made it into a limo. That's not all. Got more. As if you hadn't heard enough, I've got more. How many of you remember the 1951 film entitled The African Queen? All right. It was starring Humphrey Bogart and Katharine Hepburn. Both won Academy Awards for Best Actor and Best Actress. No, the film wasn't filmed in Sunriver. The movie wasn't filmed in Sunriver, nor on the Deschutes River. Better yet, the tugboat used in the film, called the African Queen, seen here, was purchased by a guy out in Eugene by the name of Hal Bailey. Hal brought it over to Sunriver, renamed it the Sunriver Queen, and had it at the marina. You could go on his tugboat and have an excursion on what was the African Queen. And he would blow that tug whistle. And if you remember the movie, that whistle was really loud. Both the state and the local governments didn't like this. So after having several agencies go after him, he moved it to Florida. So moving on. 2 events in 1980 were significant to our history. The first was Lowe's Enterprises, Inc. purchased Connecticut Mutual, purchased the company. And this is a guy named Charlie Peck, who was the managing partner. And it was a great thing for Sunriver. At the time, Sunriver was valued at $23.6 million when they purchased it. They did a tremendous amount. They remodeled the mall, the lodge. One of the things they did that we all have come to benefit from, they built the road to Mount Bachelor. And they paid to maintain it for many years before the ODOT took over that. But they felt the need that we had to have a shortcut to Mount Bachelor. They, as we all know, remodeled all of their lodge condos. They put in the cove, remodeled the stables, the marina. They've just been a tremendous partner to us. The second significant event was the turnover of management of Sunriver to the SROA, the Homeowners Association, on January 1st, 1987. Interestingly, it was included in the plan of Sunriver, 1965, on how they were going to transition. And in 1974, before the transition even was made, they formed an SROA board of directors to help manage that transition. And John Gray said, well, we're going to transition in the plan, transition to the homeowners when 90% of the lots are sold, or in 1999. Well, 90% of the lots were sold in 1987, so it was turned over. But before that, they turned over the south pool, they turned over the tennis courts, and so forth to the Sunriver board, even though it wasn't official to manage. And when the transition came, it was totally, as I understand, totally transparent. So it was a great move in planning. Moving on in history, John Gray's goal, one of them, was to create a community that had all the advantages of a city, but without the bureaucracy that came from having a city. By the early 90s, we had all these things in place. Fire, television, cable system, post office, library, all these things. So you can see it pretty much met his goals. The dreaded I word for some of us who are old timers popped its head. Stand up, Barbara Wade. Barbara was board president when we went through the incorporation exercise in 1994. Let me explain what happened. One of the things that was never anticipated was that the state and local governments found a way to gain more revenue by charging overnight guests a room tax. People who come to visit can afford to pay a room tax, so we'll just tax them, and then all of the resort and the property management companies and individuals who rented houses in the Sunriver could pay this. So, in 1992, a group said that money is going to, the local money is going to the Deschutes County. You know what the money was spent for? A small portion was spent investing in a new organization called COVA, Central Oregon Visitors Association. But over 90% of the money went to fund the Deschutes County Sheriff Department. So we were funding, in essence, because we were by far the largest contributor to this fund, we were supporting the Sheriff's Department. We had our own police department. We didn't need the Sheriff's Department. So this group formed the Sunriver Incorporation Committee and went to the county and said, we want to incorporate. So we get that money rather than you get the money. County commissioners looked at themselves and said, what are we going to do to fund the Sheriff's Department if we allow this to go through? So we said, you don't have enough information. So the committee didn't take no for an answer. They went to the board and said, board, we need your help in getting incorporated. So the board, under Barb's leadership, and Dan Winkenberry, who was the president the year before, spent a lot of time analyzing this. And they determined that, yeah, it would be nice to have that revenue. But the downside is that we become a city. And we become a city 30 days after the vote. The only people who could vote for incorporation were the permanent residents. So you had to be a registered voter in the county. And so about 80% of our owners wouldn't be able to vote, not only in the election, but in other matters that cities would deal with. We would have no control over our speed limits, roads. We would have to annex Deschutes River Woods or some other area outside Sunriver to meet the requirements for low-income housing. So the board came out and said, no, we don't recommend this. But we went to the vote, and the two sides were adamant about each side. And they would have pamphlets, letters going out, meetings, and so forth. So it went to the vote in '94. 79% of the owners said, no, we are not going to be a city. It was so contentious that the people who voted for the incorporation didn't speak to their friends and neighbors who voted for it. It was that bad. Many of them ended up moving. They had a mass migration to Mountain High of the folks who wanted to go ahead with incorporation. Terrible issue. Well, interestingly enough, it still pops its head once in a while because we now are giving about $7 million to Deschutes County in annual room tax. Moving right along, shark. I have to go quickly on this. The history behind the building a shark is a class in and to itself, but I want to give you some highlights. The South Pool was built in 1969 by the resort. It had an estimated lifespan of 30 years. So if you add 69 and 30, it's 1999. It was still in existence in 2006 and 7. And every year, the board would have to allocate money to stop the leaks and repair the South Pool. All of a sudden, in about that 2006 timeframe, the contractors who had repaired the pool said, no more, you can't do it anymore. It's going to continually leak, and you'll just pay the water bill as it's leaking. So our maintenance costs were rising rapidly, and something had to be done. If the failure of the South Pool wasn't enough, SRA board hired an outside consultant called Felix out of Denver to come in and look at our reserves. And we had always managed our reserves internally. They came in and did a study and realized that we didn't have our roads and pathways under our reserves. So we repaired those in our maintenance costs. And they said, nobody does that. You've got to have a reserve set aside. So the board said, well, if we don't have enough money to take care of our roads and pathways, how are we going to pay for the maintenance of Shark? So they determined that we had to do something about it. So there was an effort undertaken to educate our owners and add $30 a month to our monthly maintenance fees. And it was called Restore the Pride. Here's a picture. And we had a vote, and 80% of the owners said, let's go for it. Let's go ahead and tax ourselves, in essence, $30 a month for reserves. So then we could go ahead, now we have the reserves, to go ahead and look at what are we going to do with Shark. It wasn't called Shark, of course. We could replace it, the South Pool where it was. We could take this property and build on it. Some people suggested we take Mavericks and buy Mavericks and do that. So we spent 2 years looking at the pros and cons of all the options. And at the end, we decided the only real recourse was to take this property and build on it. So we had a lot of owner input into what we wanted in this facility, and I think you can all appreciate the importance of having that owner input. So in the summer of 2009, we were at the depth of the recession. We went out and had a vote of our owners to spend $4,500 each, $19 million to build this facility. 80% of the owners voted, and 69% said, let's do it. I was involved in that effort, and I recall we had a party the night the vote came in, and we were so happy about it. And I went up to Bill Peck at the session. I hadn't seen him. I went up to him and gave him a hug. And I said, Bill, I feel like the dog that caught the car. The voters have put their faith in us to build this facility for $19 million. So I want to be involved to make sure, because I was involved. So I was. And Hugh Palcic was in the audience. He and I spearheaded this effort. We built this facility in 14 months. 4 months early, and $1 million under budget. And I think you would agree with me that it has turned out to be a success. There's also a very nice voter conference. But that's not all. This building allowed us to solve a problem that erupted when I was president. We found asbestos right out here. And the Environmental Protection Agencies had a fit. So every year we'd have to bring in people in these hazmat uniforms and search over here to see if we can't find specks of asbestos. We had to have a solution. Shark solved that solution. That asbestos is still buried there somewhere underneath the parking lot. Hopefully never to be seen or heard from. Let me get back to talking about the value of how important the vote was in 2007 to increase our reserves. Since then, we've been able to replace almost all our roads, all of them that needed to be replaced, 38 miles of bike paths, which were widened to make it easier for bike paths and for bicycles and for people to pass each other. These funds have also been used to replace those 50-year-old unsafe and deteriorating tunnels with tunnels that are much prettier and safer and wider. We also used reserve funds to build a much-needed marina under the chutes. And we've been able to replace almost all of our aging and deteriorating tennis courts with new state-of-the-art facilities. We also now have pickleball courts. Most recently, the 2 circles to relieve congestion coming into Sunriver and into the mall have been completed, and I think very successfully. While the owners, we owners, have had the opportunity to vote on these measures, we haven't had a single assessment because of the reserves. Finally, last year, owners were involved in helping to figure out what to do with the aging North Pool. After a positive vote of our owners in August, you can see work has begun on building the entirely new owners-only pool facility. This is the map of what it will look like when it's completed. But not all of the projects are headline makers. Our reservists have also replaced the aging and dangerous play structures at Fort Rock Park, as well as putting in bathrooms that to eventually replace the porta potties that have been there for many years. So I hope this class has been beneficial. I've done it fast. In the beginning of the class, I mentioned that after my 1969 visit, I doubted that Sunriver could pull it off. But we did it. Now I know, and I understand why we will continue to be the premier residential and resort community in the country. But there is also much that I didn't cover in this talk. For example, I didn't talk about President Bush's visit, nor Phil Knight's wife being fined $25,000 for cutting down trees. I didn't have time to include such wonderful video and recordings of our founders, or to discuss the history of, gotta find my notes here, of many of our wonderful institutions that we have that make our community what it is today. Nature Center, Elgin Rangers, War on Weeds, you name it. We have so many things going on I'd like to talk about in the future. Where are we going here? So here's my final exam. Here's the answers to my final exam. So those are things I haven't included. So I appreciate the opportunity. It's been a wonderful journey for me, and I think you've enjoyed walking through it with me. There's much more to be covered, but hopefully it'll be Joe, did I miss out on something? Yes, you want to come up and look. Have a chance to come up and look and see what Evans Park looks like and what we might have had instead of Sunriver. Questions? Any questions? I'm not going anywhere, so if you have some, come on up.